morning.
Good morning, sir.
National anthem, please.
Arise, O combat.
Let me start by congratulating you and the heads of the three arms of government and levels of government for being in office at Nigeria's Diamond Jubilee. Despite the challenges of the times, whether past or present, your leadership and that of your predecessors give us reasons to be proud of modest but undeniable achievements. The Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Act was passed and came into force in June 2000 as the first anti-corruption agency of Nigeria's Fourth Republic. The Commission has had 4 governing boards and chairmen, with a 4th chairman and the board currently in office. Your Excellency, sir, I wish to recognize posthumously the pioneer chairman, the late Honorable Justice Mustafa Akanbi, the 2nd chairman, the Honorable Justice Emmanuel Ayola, a retired Justice of the Supreme Court, the 3rd chairman, Mr. Epo Nta, and the 4th board and its members who are building on the foundations that have been laid by these distinguished Nigerians. The Icpc was established to investigate and, where necessary, to prosecute corruption and related offenses, to prevent corruption by examining the systems and the processes of public bodies that predispose them to corruption, and to direct or supervise a review of such practices, and to educate and enlist the support of the public against corruption. Within this threefold mandate, sir, the Commission has in the past 20 years recorded a number of milestones. It has treated over 20,000 petitions, found over 5,000 worthy of full investigation, and prosecuted about 1,000 of such investigated cases. Within the same period, sir, we have conducted 47 full system study reviews, 582 reviews focusing on personnel and capital budget utilization, the review of the Open Treasury Portal, which was commissioned by Mr. President late last year, and implementation of some of the recommendations of the report of the Auditor General of the Federation on MDAs. We have conducted corruption risk assessments on the key sectors of the economy and made recommendations towards improving same to improve governance, most notably in the transport sector, education, health, and the e-government system. We have established 445 anti-corruption and transparency units in MDAs, established the Anti-Corruption Academy of Nigeria, which has trained about 14,000 public servants in about 5 years. We have also opened 15 state offices across Nigeria, with 2 in each geopolitical zone of the Federation. The Icpc was privileged to make input into the design and the introduction of the BVN, the IPs, and the GIFMIS, to mention a few achievements. Sir, we developed the National Values Curriculum that is being taught through different subjects at primary and post-primary levels in schools across Nigeria. And much more recently, we led the initiative for the preparation of the National Ethics and Integrity Policy that Mr. President will launch today. The current board has focused on activities that strengthen government's desire to eradicate corruption in the revenue and expenditure sides of government, and to take development closer to the people by ensuring value for money in the implementation of publicly funded projects. I will mention a few of our interventions, sir. Mr. President will recall that the Commission introduced the Constituency Projects Tracking Initiative in 2019. This year, we expanded the scope to include executive projects with special attention to areas that are of keen interest to government, most notably agriculture, water resources, power, education, and health. The second phase of the tracking exercise, which commenced this year, covers 722 projects. 490 of these were for zonal intervention projects, otherwise called constituency projects, and 232 focused on executive projects, spread across 16 states of the Federation. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the acute shortage of manpower that we have, we used a threshold of 100 million naira for project selection. This means that we left out projects that were below 100 million in value. This decision produced the unintended consequence of a concentration on the projects of distinguished senators of the Federal Republic and very few projects from the lower chamber. I wish to put on record that we did not set out to target the Senate by this exercise. We just practically selected projects that we could monitor based on value. As with Phase 1, the projects were selected by a steering committee comprising and led by the Icpc, but made up of the Budget Office, Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, Office of the Auditor General of the Federation, the BPP, the media, and some selected civil society organizations, and the Nigerian Institute of Quantity Surveyors. No single project was inserted by an individual or by the chairman of Icpc. I simply approve whatever the steering committee wants to track. The 2020 exercise revealed some improvement in project delivery, although many challenges remain. Amongst other anomalies, we found, for example, sir, and I should say that the full report is contained in the pack that is in front of Mr. President and the distinguished members who are here today. It is titled the Constituency and Executive Project Tracking Report, Interim Report. We found, for example, sir, the categorization of projects by civil servants and MDAs as ongoing in order to get the Ministry of Finance and Budget and Planning to admit those projects. A number of the projects that were described as ongoing were actually found out to be new projects that ought to have been excluded in order to enable government to complete existing projects as planned. Number 2, we found the absence of needs assessment. Projects were recommended by sponsors for communities that did not require them. So, for example, we found recommended for some communities primary health care centers or hospitals that already existed. And when these are built, they can hardly be staffed nor equipped or furnished. We found the same thing with asking for computers for schools. They already had computers. Tons of them are bought and left in boxes. Such projects end up being abandoned in spite of the huge sums appropriated for them. Number 3, some projects were found to be sited on private property or private houses or land, thus appropriating common assets to personal use without going through the formality of transferring such private land or property to the public or to the communities on which those projects are being sited, thus denying the communities of the benefit of the projects. We found, sir, number 4, the absence of synergy between outgoing project sponsors and their successors. So, for example, if a legislator sponsors a project and did not return to the legislature, the project where it is half done with government public funds, they are abandoned, and the new person who comes in to represent that constituency or community simply nominates new projects, and the old projects are abandoned without regard for the money that had already been spent by the public for the project. Number 5, beg your pardon. There's a rampant use of companies that are owned by officers of implementing MDAs or companies owned by sponsoring legislators or their family members to execute projects. If they are qualified, this itself is not a problem. The problem is that many of such projects end up being poorly done or inflated in terms of value, thus denying the public of what it deserves. We found in some cases conspiracy between the legislative aides of the sponsors and the implementing MDs and the contractors to undermine the quality and the quantity of the projects without the knowledge of the sponsor. We found that vague project description often results in diversion of funds by some of the implementing MDAs or the project sponsor with a collusion of contractors. And we found also, finally, the absence of community ownership of projects, because communities are sometimes not consulted and they are often largely ignorant of projects that have been approved for them. These are just some of the findings. The full report, as I said, is in the park and is in the public domain from today. Thus far, sir, ICPC effort from this initiative has forced 59 contractors handling projects worth 2.25 billion back to site. Their names and the location of those projects are contained in the report that we have produced. The list of the affected projects is contained in the CPTG interim report for 2020, but we must also mention that we found that some projects were very well done and they met the value for money threshold because the sponsors paid particular attention and made sure that they were properly done. Such projects have also been listed in Appendix 4 of our report, commending those who sponsored them, seeing them to fruition. Furthermore, sir, we have recovered and mostly returned to beneficiary communities assets worth about 700 million and cash of almost 200 million in the asset recovery account. In order to improve the delivery of executive and constituency projects, we again wish to recommend that government should, as a policy, prohibit MDAs from executing projects that are outside of their core mandate. This is because some of them have inadequate capacity, human capital, to supervise and properly implement those projects as intended by the sponsors and as intended by government. For example, if we look at a breakdown of the 2020 zonal intervention projects, which we also did for public education and is also in the pack that we've presented, over 10% of the allocation, ZIP allocation, which is usually 100 billion, about 13.2 billion went to one MDA with very small human capital and capacity to monitor and ensure that the projects get effectively done. Secondly, we want to advise better synergy between project sponsors and benefiting communities. Implementing agencies should liaise with communities where necessary, for example, to designate where projects should be sited where the sponsor refuses to do so. Much more importantly, it helps the communities to take ownership of projects. It is one thing for a sponsor to recommend a project, but the community expectation that the sponsor will continue to maintain the project for his lifetime is not fair on the sponsor. And so it is important that this should be clarified and a synergy between the community and the sponsors. The conversion of projects from appropriated ones to another one by sponsors or implementing MDAs should be severely punished. The Commission will, of course, in future, prosecute false description of projects as ongoing in order to smuggle them into the budget. The late releases of budget with short timeline for performance also leaves room for default. In one case, we found that budget release that was late, the implementing MDA gave contractors 3 weeks to complete projects, which included building, for example. This situation leaves room for default and waste of public funds or corruption. Next, sir, I go to our prevention mandate. The application of the Commission's prevention powers is divided into 4 areas. We reviewed transactions on the Open Treasury portal. We reviewed the personnel and capital budget utilization of some selected MDAs. Based on our collaboration with the Auditor General of the Federation, we reviewed his report on infractions that he found on some MDAs. And finally, we administered the Ethics and Integrity Scorecard on MDAs as an indication of their corruption risk or their strength to withstand or to stand against corruption. On the Open Treasury portal, sir, we reviewed transactions from January up to August. We reviewed 268 MDAs. We found that 72 had cumulative suspected infractions worth over 90 million, which we selected in phase 1. And we focused on payments, of course, with the portal captures of threshold of 5 million and above. But sometimes we went below the 5 million just to see what had happened. Of this, we noticed that 4.1 billion was transferred by some MDAs to sub-TSA accounts, and 4.2 billion was paid to individuals, which was not satisfactorily explained to us. Investigations are ongoing in this regard. But I should observe that the payment of money that should be awarded as contracts or project costs to proper companies that should have gone through procurement. When you pay to individuals, the first thing that suffers is tax, because the individuals who are purportedly going to implement those projects don't pay tax. And so government's tax revenue expectations is not met because of this practice of paying project funds to individuals. We observed that frequently the transfer of money to sub-TSA was usually to prevent disbursement from being monitored online on GIFMIS, either by the anti-corruption agencies or even the Accountant General of the Federation. We discovered payments to federal colleges, secondary schools for school feeding, amounting to 2.67 billion during the lockdown when children were not in school, and some of this money we traced ended up in personal accounts. We have arrested those who are involved, and investigations are ongoing to who they fed when children were at home and there was a lockdown. Our focus on revenue generating agency, based on our collaboration with the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation, has focused on revenue generating agency but has been delayed by COVID-19 lockdown. We are currently doing 2 focal agencies, namely the Federal Inland Revenue and the Nigerian Customs for this pilot stage. As with 2019, sir, we did some personnel and capital budget utilization review, focusing on health and education sectors. In the health sector, about 52 institutions were reviewed, and we found, again, about surplus of 4.6 billion on personnel costs, which we recommended to the Honorable Minister of Finance to be restrained from abuse, except the agencies were able to offer credible explanations. We still discovered abuse of personnel costs by some officers on the GIFMIS platform, most notably the Usman Dan Fodio University Teaching Hospital, where 227 million was diverted by a young man of 28 years old from the surplus personnel cost without the knowledge of his superior and management. He used technology, and we brought him to our office to show us exactly what he did. We noticed some improvements, sir, in the health institutions that we looked at compared to 2019, in their utilization of funds and compliance with due process. Nevertheless, we wish to humbly suggest, sir, that our recommendations on reallocation of funds to health institutions are yet to be carried out by government, and we urge that this should be done. It will assist these institutions to better meet their fiscal and transparency standards and relieve them of some of the challenges responsible for perennial default and susceptibility to investigation. We strongly recommend that visitation teams should be appointed to these health tertiary institutions and federal medical centers to conduct a performance and personnel audit on them and to determine the actual number of personnel required for optimum performance, because we keep finding them claiming personnel that we are not persuaded exists. It is anomalous, for example, to find that some federal medical centers have more personnel than teaching hospitals. We also recommend that government should properly define what is internally generated revenue and provide adequate overhead allocations and funding for the outsourced services of these institutions from what we are very sure are the inevitable savings from personnel costs when the audit is done. On the education sector, sir, in view of our collaboration with the Auditor General, we reviewed infractions that the Auditor General found in his 2017 report, and we selected about 78 education sector MDAs which are being reviewed. The common findings are payment, again, of bulk sums to staff accounts, including so-called project funds. As I said, oftentimes the first casualty is tax, because tax is never paid by those individuals. Whereas if the proper track had been followed, government will earn the tax revenue that is projected for. We noticed non-deduction and remittance of taxes and IGR, payment of unapproved allowances, bulk payments to microfinance banks. Some of these institutions pay money to microfinance banks because many of those microfinance banks are not covered by this BVN policy. We're hoping that the CBN will extend the BVN policy and government will extend the BVN policy to them so that we can track very quickly. I will move very quickly to other areas of our work. The ethics and integrity scorecard on MDAs was designed to identify institutional weaknesses that promote corruption in the public service. In spite of the pandemic and restrictions, the Commission deployed the scorecard on 352 MDAs nationwide. Findings from this survey is also included in the pack that are before your excellencies. It is clear that we noticed that financial management scored slightly better. And the reason for this is because government had insisted on the automation of transactions through gift means, TSA, Icpc, and remitter, and e-platform. Unfortunately, the areas that scored low was on management, culture, and structure and administrative system. We find out that abuse takes place because this area is yet to be strengthened. We urge that government will strengthen the administrative and management structures so that it will complement the financial management infrastructure that government has put in place. In the list that we have published, we've showed the corruption risks, MDAs, and those that scored very well. On asset recovery, sir, the Commission has, in the process of its enforcement measures, based on intelligence, recovered some sums of money. For example, early in the year, we seized about 16 billion from the Federal Ministry of Agric because the money was moved under suspicious circumstances below the threshold that will put it under the purview of the Accountant General or other anti-corruption agencies. Furthermore, some of the money we found was paid into some personal accounts and used for non-official purposes. Although investigations are ongoing, delayed due to COVID-19, the bulk of the money restrained in CBN was released in the peak of the pandemic when the ministry appealed to the Commission that it needed to make palliatives available to Nigerians to reduce the effect of COVID-19. The Commission and the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation are tracking the use of these funds to ensure that there is value for money. On another note, we found that some contractors were paid for jobs not done or deliberately overpaid for jobs done, and the excess was shared by the contractors and some of the defaulting officers. One individual from the ministry, who is now deceased, appropriated over 2.5 billion to himself and his cronies. I will skip some of the other assets that we have recovered, and I go quickly towards our effort at public education and enlightenment. Your Excellency will recall that in 2019 we pledged to involve communities and citizens in project monitoring. In fulfillment of that pledge, sir, we launched the My Constituency, My Project nationwide, during which we sensitized and enlisted community ownership. We also accompanied that by publishing a toll-free line through which Nigerians can call in to our office to find out the projects that government has allocated for their constituency. And we are happy to report that this has worked very well, but there's still much more to be done. We also published a leaflet breaking down zonal intervention projects by sector, by state, and by region in order to guide the public from tracking what government is doing for themselves to reduce the complaint that they have been abandoned. To boost community involvement for our 20th anniversary, we launched in July the 20 million from Icpc at 20 project, with two main competitions aimed at provoking youth creativity and support for the fight against corruption. These were the National Music Competition and the National Essay Competition for junior and secondary schools with anti-corruption or integrity clubs. Icpc will give out 20 million prize money with the kind support of MacArthur Foundation. Your Excellency, sir, I wish to use this opportunity to thank the MacArthur Foundation and its country director, Dr. Kolia Ahmed Shetima, for his invaluable and generous support to Icpc in particular and Nigeria in general. I will, in the course of this event, sir, introduce the winners of the competitions and those of the public sector and integrity awardees. Your Excellency, sir, we're delighted that Mr. President will today launch the National Ethics and Integrity Policy as one of the milestones for Nigeria at 60 and Icpc at 20. We're delighted to have initiated and actively worked on this policy with stakeholders from the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation and the National Orientation Agency to return Nigerians to the values of old that made Nigeria great from north to south, east to west, and that promoted values that are cherished by Mr. President. The Ethics and Integrity Policy is a follow-up to previous initiatives of the Commission, such as the establishment of the Anti-Corruption and Transparency Units in 2002 and the development of the National Values Curriculum for Teaching, which has been introduced since 2012. This policy is a befitting follow-up to these initiatives, and we again thank those who have partnered with us for doing this. Sir, let me end my speech by extending the profound gratitude of the Commission, its management and staff to Mr. President, sir, for your leadership and for your support to the work of the Commission. Your unequivocal stand against corruption is a morale booster to the fight against corruption. Without your stand and positioning, the message will be diluted to do or not to do. This is not the case with you, sir. Your message is clear. If we do not kill corruption, corruption will kill Nigeria. We assure you, sir, that as your foot soldiers, we will not allow corruption to kill Nigeria. I also want to thank the Senate President in particular, and through him the committees that oversight the Commission in both the Senate and the House of Reps, and indeed the entire legislature, for their cooperation and understanding.
This partnership has been working and should be supported by all at all times. Sections 4, subsections 1 and 2 of the 1999 Constitution as amended vest the legislative powers of the Federal Republic of Nigeria on the National Assembly. As a conscious and patriotic assembly, the 9th National Assembly has passed several important legislations to advance the social and economic well-being of our country. Some of these bills that were passed that have received presidential assent contain important anti-corruption components. For example, the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020 is of particular significance because sections 119 to 123 of the Act have, for the first time in the history of this country, made provisions for establishment of beneficial ownership register. This has far-reaching implications for control of corruption, money laundering, and investigation of assets by anti-corruption agencies. Part of the critical anti-corruption function of the National Assembly is oversight function. In furtherance of its anti-corruption mandate and the directive principle of state policy of eradicating corruption in Section 15, subsection 5 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, the 9th National Assembly have, through committees of both chambers of the National Assembly, leveraged on the power of oversight and public hearing. Exercise of these functions is part of the demands of transparency, accountability, and open governance that are vital components of the change agenda. Public hearings and the revelations they generate should be seen as part of the legislature's contribution to the war against corruption in Nigeria. I therefore call on Nigerians to support legislative investigations and urge heads of ministries, departments, and agencies to respect and honor invitations by relevant committees of the National Assembly in this all-important task of governance. The prize of leadership is certainly openness and transparency. The National Assembly will continue to shine the light on any MDA or government procedure that lacks transparency. I commend the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation and indeed the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission Icpc for organizing this second National Summit on Diminishing Corruption. I also commend the Icpc for a spirit of collaboration with other institutions of government. Icpc organized a retreat with anti-corruption committees of the National Assembly recently to intensify synergy with the legislature. As the theme of the summit suggests, we need to work together as Nigerians, as arms and institutions of government to roll back corruption in our country. I believe that we can achieve our targets with a united front. I urge this summit to come up with actionable steps to rid Nigeria of corruption and forward proposals requiring legislation to the National Assembly for action. We shall endeavor to live up to the yearnings and aspirations of the Nigerian people at all times. Once again, congratulations, Nigeria. Congratulations, Mr. President. Congratulations, Icpc. Thank you for listening.
It's of national significance because a few days from today, we will be marking the 60th independence anniversary of our dear country. This year is also the 20th anniversary of the establishment of the Icpc. I facilitated with the Icpc on the celebration of our 20th anniversary. I am personally connected with Icpc, Mr. President, because I had the privilege of handing over the present headquarters of the Commission to late Justice Mustafa Akombi, the pioneer chairman of Icpc, when I was serving as the executive member in the interim management committee of the defunct Petroleum Trust Fund, which you had the privilege to chair for several years. Icpc has come of age and is growing in leaps and bounds. Your Excellency, fighting corruption is a core priority of this administration because, as we all know, corruption poses an essential threat to Nigeria. Mr. President has at home and abroad canvassed the imperative to put in place policies and measures to reduce corruption. Over the years, corruption has hindered government from attaining critical objectives and national development plans. The surest way that we as a nation can realize the sustainable development goals and core national objectives is to significantly reduce corruption. Mr. President has firmly underscored the need for effective action against corruption by this administration by the introduction of policies and measures to reduce corruption, particularly in the public sector of our country. The significance of tackling corruption in public service is anchored on the fact that they remain the main vehicle for formulating and implementing government programs and policies, which implies that they drive all the necessary processes for good governance. In this wise, if the public service is mired in corrupt practices, it provides an unfettered opportunity for the private sector and other Nigerians to engage in such practices. However, if the public service abides by the required rules and regulations for conducting businesses, and such opportunities are reduced, if not eliminated, and they would form the bulwark in dealing with corrupt practices. This summit, Your Excellency, is a follow-up to last year's National Summit on Diminishing Corruption in the Public Sector, jointly organized by my office and the Icpc. The theme of this year's summit is Together Against Corruption, in consonance with the theme of our 60th independence anniversary. This year's theme is a call for unity and concerted efforts in the fight against corruption. It stresses that fighting corruption is not the work of government alone. Every citizen, faith-based organizations, traditional institutions, and civil societies, the media, and the private sector, and youth must join in this fight. This summit, Your Excellency, will mark an important event in the life of Nigeria, as it will witness the launching of the National Ethics and Integrity Policy by Mr. President. The policy was approved by the Federal Executive Council at its 2020 20th meeting held on Wednesday, 19th August 2020. I wish to commend the Icpc for preparation of the draft policy and also appreciate the National Orientation Agency for its collaborative role in bringing this policy to fruition. If we recognize that the public service is the vehicle for delivery of government policies, programs, and projects, it goes without saying that honesty and integrity are crucial ingredients for public service delivery. Therefore, those who distinguish themselves in this regard deserve recognition. Last year, Mr. President, presented Public Service Integrity Award to 2 outstanding public servants. We are continuing with this annual recognition of deserving public servants with presidential recognition of the 2020 recipients of this award. In commemoration of her 20th anniversary, the ICPC organized 20th anniversary music and essay competitions on the theme of anti-corruption. The essay competition was organized for junior and secondary school students. Mr. President will also present awards to the winners of this competition a short while from now. I commend the ICPC for using this unique initiative to involve Nigerian youth in the fight against corruption. Nigerian youths are crucial to the success of this fight against corruption, and I call on Nigerian youth to inculcate the values of honesty and integrity at home, in school, and wherever they may find themselves. Let me close, Your Excellency, Mr. President, by repeating what I said in July this year during the African Regional Webinar on combating corruption and illicit financial flows organized by the ICPC earlier in the year, where I said, and I quote, "We all need to take responsibility for the fight against corruption as we take responsibility against infection of COVID-19. COVID-19 kills, but corruption kills even more. ICPC alone cannot fight corruption. We all must be involved. Failure to take responsibility is dangerous to self and the society as whole." Unquote. The journey to self-responsibility begins with ethical reorientation and embracing integrity as a way of life, which the National Ethics and Integrity Policy promotes. Once more, Your Excellency, I congratulate the ICPC on its 20th anniversary and welcome you all to this summit. And I wish you a fruitful deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
You are welcome.
Thank you. Well done. Congratulations. Congratulations.
They have all been told to look very good. Very good. Very good.
Yes, we.
This year marks 2 significant hallmarks in the history of our country. A few days from now, we will, by the grace of God, be celebrating Nigeria's 60th anniversary as an independent, sovereign nation. This summit also commemorates the 20th anniversary of the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offenses Commission. The Commission emerged as part of the measures that successively administrations in Nigeria have put in place over the years to fight corruption. As military head of state, I fought corruption headlong and held public officers who abused their offices or misused public funds to account. Furthermore, I introduced the war against indiscipline, one of various cardinal objectives was promotion of our cherished culture of ethical conduct, integrity, and hard work. I recognize in 1984, as I do even more now, that corruption poses a clear danger to Nigeria. So we cannot relent in efforts to eradicate it from our society. As I have often reminded Nigerians, I quote, "If we do not kill corruption, corruption will kill Nigeria," unquote. In my inaugural speech in 2015, I affirmed the determination of this administration to rebuild and reform the public service to become more effective and serviceable. I charge public servants to apply themselves with integrity to stabilize the system and solicited the cooperation of the legislative arm to maintain their brief of making laws and carrying out oversight functions. In the same speech, I called for the reform of the judicial system and for the judiciary to act with dispatch in cases, especially cases on corruption, serious financial crimes, and abuse of office. I believe that it is when the three arms and the three levels of government work together that government will be enabled to serve the country. We will also see the positive impact of our efforts reaching all and sundry across the country. Bearing this critical factor in mind, I am happy that the theme of this year's summit by Icpc is Together Against Corruption. I am aware that this theme derives from the theme of our 60th anniversary celebration. Together as a nation, as a people, the three arms and three tiers of government, working together, we can attack corruption and realize the vast potentials of our country. I said in my speech at the 2018 NBA Annual General Conference that one of the challenges we face in delivering the expectation of our citizens is how to transform our society from one in which impunity in the management of national resources is the norm to one in which a culture of accountability and transparency prevails. We need to deploy resources to address our common needs rather than the greed of careless few. We need a corruption-free public sector to achieve this transformation. We need a judicial system that dispenses justice without undue delay and technicality. We need laws and legal system to be reformed to deliver justice to every citizen without regard to status. And finally, we need ethical reorientation of the people to achieve this goal. When we work together against corruption, we can defeat it. I want to commend the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation and the Icpc for organizing this summit and including in the program an opportunity for the three arms of government to indicate their roles in meeting the aspiration of Nigerians to have a corruption-free society. I am particularly pleased by the recognition and participation of young Nigerians and non-state actors, especially the media and civil society at this event, because nobody must be left behind and all hands must be on deck in the fight against corruption. I wish to reiterate the role of preventive measures and public education and enlightenment against corruption. This government, though through the Open Treasury Initiative, Treasury Single Account, Government Integrity, Financial Management Information System, Bank Verification Number, and many more, is implementing different corruption prevention measures to track and retain government revenue for the use of the people. I commend the Icpc for its enforcement and prevention measures, including system review of capital and personal budget, regular analysis of the Open Treasury platform, enforcement action against diversion and mismanagement of public funds, working with FIRS to increase the number of companies and persons within the tax net, tracking of constituency project budget utilization for the benefit of ordinary Nigerians, and its monitoring of implementation of budget by the executive in key sectors like agriculture sector. The Icpc system studies and review, ethics and integrity compliance scorecard of MDAs are excellent preventive measures for detection of early warning signs of vulnerability of MDAs to corruption, and a way of assisting government take note of MDAs that are prone to corruption and deserve closer scrutiny of government and law enforcement agencies. I note that Icpc is documenting its work, achievements, and recommendations to government. I am happy to present the book marking its 20th anniversary titled Icpc and the War Against Corruption in Nigeria, Reflections for a New Vision, and 6 other publications, including the Nigerian Corruption Index, Constituency and Executive Projects, Tracking Initiative Interim Report 2020, the Ethics and Integrity Compliance Scorecard of MDAs 2020, Accountability for Security Votes, and Eradicating Electoral Corruption and Vote Buying. I am also happy to recognize winners of Icpc Youth Music and Essay competitions on promotion of anti-corruption values. The music and essay competitions organized by Icpc show the true character and grit of Nigerian youth. I urge them to seize the moment and also stand together with one voice against corruption. Let me use this opportunity to recognize and commend Opeyemi Peter Adeboye as winner of the Anti-Corruption Music Award, Chikezi Favor, winner of Junior Secondary School Competition, and Matilda Daniels, winner of the Senior Secondary School Competition. As I mentioned earlier, the importance of the public service to our anti-corruption effort. I am therefore extremely delighted to recognize and present the 2020 Public Service Integrity Award to 2 honest public servants who have demonstrated the will to look away from graft and corruption. CSP Francis Osagi Erabo of the Nigeria Police, and Hamza Adamu Buai of the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment are both recognized and acknowledged as worthy Nigerians, public servants who make us proud. I congratulate all the awardees. Even though COVID-19 has not permitted the kind of ceremony that you deserve, Nigeria is proud of you. You are a pride to your families, institutions, and Nigeria. These public service awards remind us of the need for value reorientation and revival of ethics and integrity in national life. I am happy that the Icpc, in collaboration with the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation and National Orientation Agency, worked together to prepare and present the National Ethics and Integrity Policy to the Federal Executive Council as part of the commemorative activities for Nigeria at 60. Federal Executive Council adopted this policy on the 19th of August 2020. I commend the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Icpc, and National Orientation Agency for bringing to fruition this important priority objective of this administration. The National Ethics and Integrity Policy Project, government's aspirations for rediscovery of our cherished traditional ethical values of honesty, integrity, hard work, truth and justice, unity, faith, and consideration for one another irrespective of status or background. Corruption and corruptive tendencies are abhorrent to these core ethical values. We must all join hands together to fight corruption and return to our traditional values of honesty and integrity. I hereby use the opportunity of this summit to launch the National Ethics and Integrity Policy as a fresh roadmap to return Nigeria to these critical national values. Finally, let me use this opportunity to congratulate all Nigerians on our 60th anniversary and Icpc on its 20th anniversary. I urge all Nigerians participating in this summit to come up with recommendations on ways to further enforce our laws and prevent corruption in the public sector in Nigeria. Thank you, and God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Of emphasis on the need for collaboration between the three arms of government in the fight against corruption, which you also emphasized in your own speech. May we know why the emphasis on this, sir?
Yeah, the emphasis is to ensure that all hands are on deck. First of all, without the legislature, there wouldn't have been the Icpc in the first place. In the fourth session of the National Assembly, the Icpc bill was passed, which was assented to by the then president. So that is to tell you the level of the need and imperative of togetherness in the fight against corruption. And when you have a judiciary that works to ensure that cases of corruption are treated with dispatch, you will agree with me that that will help in the fight against corruption. If a case of a corrupt practice or alleged corrupt practice will last 4, 5, 6, 10 years or so, you know that something is wrong, and that is giving some kind of support, tacit, to the corrupt practices. But if there is always dispatch in the treatment of such cases, that will expedite action by the judiciary and to give support to the fight against corruption. So that I believe is the kind of togetherness that is so important, that is so necessary for us to ensure that we fight corruption at the level of governance. But fighting corruption also requires the support of the populace. Citizens need to be on board. And one way of ensuring that citizens are on board and remain on board is to see genuinity, sincerity, and honesty in the way and manner the fight against corruption is carried out. And I believe that so far this administration has done quite a lot on this. Some people would argue that sometimes there is selectivity in the way and manner the anti-corruption fight is fought. I think that is a matter of misunderstanding, because when you have a set of people entrusted with public funds for 16 years, where do you think most of those that will be alleged to have done the wrong thing will come from? Certainly from that set of people. So I believe that given the kind of cases that were completely dispatched, we had APC or people who are supposed to be part of this administration or part of the party in government who were also incarcerated or prosecuted. So I believe that the fight against corruption by this administration has been quite open, has been quite non-partisan, and I believe that going forward, we need all the three arms of government, in all the three levels of government. We need all citizens to be part and parcel of the fight against corruption in Nigeria.
In some opinions outside, sir, they believe, or they are claiming that this administration is not really fighting, that corruption is even higher now. What do you have to say to people like this?
Well, I don't know who they are, and I don't know what their facts are, but I will not speak to speculations. I speak to facts. I want to see the facts that there is more corruption in this administration than the previous administrations. You recall that in one administration before, we knew that somebody once said what people accuse the government of corruption was simple stealing. This administration does not see anything that appears like corruption or thievery or whatever and leaves it untreated. So I believe that it depends on who is talking. If you have an opposition, it's likely the opposition will tell you, well, there is so much persecution in courts of the opposition, that there is so much corruption in this administration and the previous one, but we know that previous administrations, well, let me be a little bit more decent and maybe non-political, but I want to tell you that this administration has done so well because we campaign on the basis of three pillars of anti-corruption, the fight against insurgency and insecurity across the country, and revitalization of our economy. So no administration or no political party in the history of Nigeria that fought its campaign on the basis of fighting corruption in Nigeria. In fact, there were administrations that never mentioned corruption in the entire tenure they had. This administration has stood firmly trying to fight corruption, and I want to believe that those who are saying that there is more corruption in Nigeria today than before are simply maybe trying to be very partisan and petty.
Thank you, sir.